I've always been drawn to the quiet of mountain passes at night. The world feels thinner up there. The air sharp, the silence pressing. When the fog settles low against the pines, it swallows every sound except my own breath. Headlights flicker against winding cliffs, their glow fading too quickly into the black. There's something about that emptiness that never felt right. The rocks seem to hold echoes, the forest stares back, and sometimes you can hear things moving where no wind should reach. That night, I pulled my car to the side of a lonely mountain road. The engine ticked as it cooled, and the world outside seemed to wait. The mist thickened, swallowing the tree line, and a faint static buzz filled the air like broken radio waves. I stepped out, expecting the soft crunch of gravel under my boots. Instead, I heard something else. A humming, low, steady, almost mechanical, drifting through the fog. I followed it, deeper into the silence until the glow of my headlights disappeared behind me. That's when I saw it. The air was heavy that night. Fog curled low against the mountain pass, drifting in ribbons across the trail. The pines stood tall and unmoving, their needles blackened against a pale sky. I was alone. The road had long since turned into dirt, my boots crunching against loose stones. Every sound felt sharper, louder. My breath, the faint scrape of my jacket. Even the silence between then, a faint buzzing. It rose from somewhere above me. Not close, not far. A static hum, clinging to the treetops like invisible wires stretched tight. At first I thought it was wind pushing through the branches. But the trees were still. Not a single limb moved. The sound deepened as I walked. A broken signal, uneven, like a voice trying to form behind the interference. Every step toward it made the forest bend. The pines seemed taller, their trunks leaning, subtly at first, then more pronounced, as if they were drawing inward, crowding around the path. I slowed, but the static pressed closer. It filled my ears, crawling under the skin. The fog thickened and shapes formed in the spaces between. That's when I saw them. Between the branches, a faint glow. Pale orbs hung in the air, trembling as though caught in a slow breath. They pulsed, dim to bright, bright to dim, like the rhythm of a living chest. I stopped breathing. The static cut away for just a moment. The silence that followed was worse. It pressed against my throat, suffocating, heavy with expectation. The orbs floated higher, their glow bleeding faintly into the mist. They weren't lanterns. They weren't fireflies. They were watching. I took one careful step back. The earth beneath my heel crumbled, snapping a twig. The static returned in a sharp burst. It wasn't sound anymore. It was something else. A signal, coded and deliberate, pulsing through the marrow of my bones. Every light shifted toward me. Not with movement, but with intent. The forest bent again. Trunks groaning softly as if the wood itself strained to listen. Branches closed overhead, blotting the pale sky. I whispered something without meaning to. A half-breathed apology, broken by fear. The orbs flickered, once, twice, then they went out. Darkness fell harder than it should have. The fog swallowed the path. The static stopped. The silence after was wrong, too complete. Like every living thing had drawn in its breath and refused to let it out. I stood frozen, waiting for the forest to release me. But it didn't. The stillness pressed closer. The air around me felt crowded, though I was alone. Every shadow leaned inward, faint outlines of branches bending in directions they should not bend. My chest ached from holding breath. I forced a shallow inhale, and even that felt loud, dangerous. There was no sound now, no static, no footsteps but my own, only the waiting. The pines stretched higher than I remembered. The trail behind me was gone. Even the memory of it felt like a trick. Something unseen lingered between the trunks, not moving, not speaking, just watching in a silence that would not break. I stayed there for a long time, too long. And even now, when I close my eyes, I can still feel the forest breathing around me, waiting for me to step forward again. The air was already cooling when I stepped onto the trail. A narrow path cut through the trees. Dusk sat heavy, spilling a faint gray light across the earth. The ground felt softer than usual, loose, almost hollow. Each step sank a little deeper than I expected. A hush pressed down around me. Only the quiet crackle of leaves moved with me. Then, another sound. Not quite mine. Something faint, like an echo under the dirt. A step following my step. But deeper, the soil seemed to shift, almost breathing, like something waiting just beneath. I told myself it was nothing, that maybe the roots were stretching or a stone had rolled. But the rhythm matched me. Every time my heel touched the ground, a dull thud rose back through the earth, too precise to ignore. I slowed. The sound slowed. I stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. Stillness in the trees. My chest rising too fast in the quiet. Then a faint shuffle answered from below. Not after me, but under me. The trail stretched empty in both directions. I was alone, yet it felt as if someone else was keeping pace. The soil trembled in strange little pulses, small vibrations I could feel through my shoes. As though something tunneled, I pressed forward, forcing my steps to quicken. But the rhythm returned, not above the ground. Not behind me, always below. The sun had slipped lower. Shadows tangled across the trees. And the earth beneath my feet kept whispering back. I glanced at the soil. Thin cracks ran like veins along the trail. I swore. Pale light glimmered faintly from within. It flickered in tiny breaths, blue, cold, not natural. I knelt, close enough to feel the chill seep out. And as I did, the footsteps pressed closer. Not faint anymore. Heavy, directly beneath. It was as if something enormous mirrored my weight, matching my movements, answering me. I staggered back, my breath breaking in short bursts. The ground shifted as though it wanted to rise. A ripple spread under the dirt, following me like a shadow. The sky had dimmed into deep indigo. Only the last scraps of daylight clung to the treetops. And still, I heard them, one step, then another, and another. The trail seemed endless. The earth beneath, alive, waiting for me to stop. I tried to steady myself, but the cracks widened as I hesitated. The glow bled brighter, faint mist curling from the soil. Each pause in my stride was answered, as if something listened, and chose when to answer back. I thought of running, but the sound beneath me quickened, eager. It wanted me to, so I froze, every muscle still. I didn't move. For a heartbeat, silence wrapped the trail. Even the trees stood still. Even the air then. A single step answered, from below, louder than all the others. The dirt beneath my feet trembled. Loose pebbles rattled against one another. I could feel the hollow space stretching far down. I lowered my gaze to the cracks. The pale light grew brighter. Soft, cold fingers of mist spilled upward. I thought I saw shapes moving in the glow. Thin silhouettes. Slender hands brushing the underside of the earth. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe properly. The footsteps now circled beneath me, one slow loop, tracing my stillness, measuring me. The soil dipped beneath my shoes, as though something pressed against it. From below, testing the weight, I wanted to scream, but the quiet pressed against my throat. Even my breath felt too loud. Then the rhythm returned. Step, step, step. Only this time, I wasn't the one moving. The ground shifted forward without me. Something walked on its own, dragging my echo into the distance. The glow dimmed. The cracks sealed with soft earth. The soil grew calm again, and yet, the memory of those steps remained in my chest. I never knew if it was still waiting, still listening, still pacing in silence beneath that hollow ground. But even now, when I walk alone at dusk, I can feel the trail answer me, not with my own steps, but with its own, and when I stop to listen, I hear it stop too. The road was empty that night. A thin stretch of asphalt swallowed by fog. The kind of silence where even the hum of the engine feels too loud. My headlights reached only a few feet ahead. Beyond that, am nothing but pale mist, drifting like breath across the valley. I was tired. More tired than I'd realized. And when the fog thickened, I slowed to a crawl. That's when I saw it, a flicker, high on the ridge. A warm amber glow, just enough to cut through the gray, a cabin light. Faint but steady. It looked like someone was home. Relief washed over me. The map on the passenger seat had been useless. No service. No towns marked anywhere close. And yet, here was shelter. I pulled over. The road crumbled into gravel at the edges, damp from the evening's drizzle. I left the car idling, its headlights pressing weakly into the fog. The ridge was steeper than it looked. Brush tangled around my boots, wet leaves clinging to my jeans. The air smelled faintly of pine, but sharp metallic too, like rain on rust. Each time I turned to look back, the car seemed farther away, not just distance. It was wrong. Like the road had shifted, retreating into the mist. I shook the thought away. Told myself it was just exhaustion, just fog playing tricks. The light ahead pulsed faintly, as though waiting for me. By the time I reached the tree line, my breath was shallow. The quiet pressed in. Even my footsteps felt muffled, absorbed by the earth, branches arched overhead. And then, a clearing. The cabin stood there. Dark wood, roof sagging with moss. The faint light flickered in one square window high on the wall. I stared at it, heart lifting slightly. But as I stepped closer, the glow wavered. Dimmed. I froze. And then it went out. The cabin was swallowed in shadow. Only pale fog drifting past its walls. I stood still, waiting for the light to return. But it didn't. Cautiously, I approached the side of the structure. The wood smelled damp, like earth, soaked and forgotten. I walked the length of the wall, searching. There was no window, not a single one. Not where the light had been. Not anywhere at all, only boards, nailed shut. Sealed tight against the world, I felt my chest tighten. My throat dry. I stepped back, scanning the walls again, certain I had made a mistake. But the truth was clearer with each breath. The cabin had no windows. It never had, and yet I had seen one. A square of amber light, beckoning me here. The silence deepened. A silence so heavy I could hear the blood in my ears. I turned to look back toward the road. The car should have been visible through the clearing. Its headlights? Something. But there was only mist. Thick, endless. Like the road had never been there at all. Panic prickled at the edges of my mind. I stepped backward, feet crunching over leaves. The cabin loomed, darker now, as though it had swallowed what little light remained. I tried to breathe slow, tried to focus. But the ridge no longer felt familiar. Every tree leaned in the wrong direction. The thought struck me. Quiet, but certain. The cabin hadn't vanished its light. It had lured me here. My chest ached. I couldn't tell how long I stood frozen, staring at walls that shouldn't exist. The silence only grew heavier, pressing against my ribs, urging me to listen. I don't remember turning away. Only the fog shifting as I stumbled back into it, hoping the road would return. Hoping the car would still be waiting, but the ridge stretched on, unfamiliar. And behind me, hidden in the mist, I swear something was watching from where the window should have been. The trail was empty. The kind of empty that made the trees feel older than time itself. It was autumn, the air sharp, thin. Each step crunched against brittle leaves, scattering echoes into the dark. I was alone, or I thought I was. The headlamp wrapped around my forehead hummed with its faint light. A narrow cone cutting through the mist. Everywhere else, only blackness. The forest pressed close. Branches arched overhead like ribs of something ancient. I told myself I wasn't lost, but my compass needle quivered, as if it wasn't sure either. That's when the light flickered. A small tremor. A blink. And in that brief absence, something shifted. A tall shape, darker than the dark itself. Too still to be a tree. Too close, I froze. The light steadied again. The shape was gone. My breath fogged in front of me, pale and uneven. I moved faster, pretending I hadn't seen it, but the lamp flickered again. Another blink. And there it was. Closer this time. My chest tightened. The shadow didn't move, yet with every flicker of the light, it seemed to lean nearer. The trail beneath my boots blurred. All I could hear was the hum of the lamp and the ragged pull of my own breath. I stopped walking. The forest hushed. No rustle of leaves, no distant owl. Only silence, thick and suffocating. The lamp blinked. The shape towered now, shoulders bent, head tilted unnaturally toward me. My pulse thudded in my ears. When the light steadied, the shadow slipped away again. Like it had never been there, but my skin knew better. It prickled, as if watched from just behind me. I adjusted the strap, hands trembling against cold plastic. The lamp flickered again. The shape was so close now I could almost hear it breathe, shallow, faint. Right behind my ear. I staggered forward, boots scraping stone. The forest spun. Every tree seemed to lean inward, narrowing the path. The light steadied once more. The trail lay empty, but I no longer believed it. A thought slipped in, uninvited. If I turned the lamp off, what would I see? I tried to ignore it. I tried to focus on the path, on the damp earth and the fading smell of pine, but the flickers grew worse. Each blink stretched longer than the last, and with each blink, the shadow breathed closer. I reached up. My fingers found the switch. I shouldn't have, but I did. The lamp clicked off. The forest collapsed into black. Pure, swallowing black. And in that darkness, I heard it. Not imagined. Not a trick of fear. A breath. Right at the back of my neck. Slow, deliberate, as if it had always been there. My own lungs locked tight. I couldn't move. The silence between us was unbearable. Then, a soft shift of weight, like someone leaning forward. I snapped the light back on. The beam cut the dark in two. But the shadow didn't vanish this time. It stayed, stretched tall behind me, longer than my body, longer than the trees. It didn't belong to me. I ran. Branches tore at my arms. The lamp bounced wildly, but the shadow clung. No matter how fast I moved, its shape followed mine. Not ahead, not beside, always behind. The path wound downward, stones slick with dew. I nearly slipped, catching myself on roots that felt like bones. My chest burned, every breath ragged. But the shadow's breath still matched mine, perfectly. At the clearing, I stopped. The forest opened into pale moonlight. The lamp trembled on my forehead, and for the first time, I dared to stand still. The shadow loomed at my back, not flickering now, not fading. It leaned with me when I leaned. It bent with me when I bent. But it was taller, always taller. I closed my eyes. I thought of taking the lamp off. Just once more. Maybe it would disappear. Maybe it would finally leave. But when I lifted my hands to the strap, I felt a warmth. Not my own, a hand, resting lightly against mine, cold yet patient, as if waiting for me to finish what I'd started. I let go. I didn't remove the lamp. The forest stayed silent. But the shadow stayed too, breathing, steady, behind me. And even now, when I close my eyes to sleep, I still feel it there, waiting. It was late autumn. The mountain road was empty, carved into stone that seemed older than time. I had been driving for hours. The sky pressed low, clouds heavy with damp. The road narrowed, winding into the pass. Ahead, the tunnel opened like a hollow mouth in the cliffside. Fog drifted from its entrance. Not spilling out, but exhaling. Slow, steady, like breath. I slowed the car. The headlights caught the vapor. Thick and pale, moving in waves, it reminded me of someone asleep. A giant chest, rising and falling. The air chilled the moment I stepped out. The quiet was absolute. Even the engine seemed muted. I walked toward the tunnel, stone archway dripping with moss. The asphalt swallowed by a thin silver mist. I should have turned back. But the road behind me had been blocked earlier. Fallen rock scattered across the lane. This was the only way through. The tunnel swallowed me quickly. Light dimmed. Walls damp, glistening with condensation. My breath joined the fog but didn't feel like my own. Each step echoed softly, but the echoes came back. Delayed, as if something else repeated them. The walls shimmered faintly, moisture catching my flashlight beam. Shapes formed, vague silhouettes shifting at the edges. At first I thought they were reflections, but they didn't match me. They moved when I was still. I whispered my own name just to hear a sound. It came back lower, dragged, stretched thin. Halfway in, the air changed, warmer, heavy, like walking into someone's breath. The tunnel seemed to pulse, a low thrum in the stone. Like standing inside a heartbeat, I touched the wall. It quivered under my hand. Wet, alive, not stone. Panic rose, but my legs carried me forward. Every few steps I looked back. The entrance was shrinking. The pale daylight fading. I thought I was walking straight, but the tunnel curved subtly, twisting, bending, swallowing perspective. Then the entrance was gone. I turned in circles. No light, no trace of where I'd come from. Only fog, dense and pressing. My flashlight flickered. The beam wavered, cutting through shifting vapor. Silhouettes drew closer, thin, elongated, some tall, some bent. None of them breathed like I did. The hum grew louder. Through my feet, up my spine, steady, rhythmic. I realized I was inside the chest of something vast, and it was awake. The air moved against me, pushing, pulling, each exhale warm, each inhale pulling fog deep into the stone. I ran, or thought I did. My footsteps soft, muffled, swallowed before they reached my ears. Walls closed in, breath shortened. Tunnel narrowed until I felt my shoulders brush wet stone. The silhouettes kept pace, not chasing, just there, waiting for me to understand. I pressed forward until I couldn't. The tunnel ended, not with light, but with another wall, warm, damp, pulsing. A rib cage of stone, alive. I leaned against it, exhausted. It shuddered beneath me, then stilled. The hum ceased. Silence fell so deep I could hear the beat of my own heart. But in the next breath, it wasn't mine, it was slower, deeper, the rhythm of something vast, surrounding me, and I stood there in the breathing dark, not knowing if I was inside, or if something had swallowed me whole. It was late, the kind of late where the road feels endless, only the hum of the tires, only the breath inside my chest. The dashboard clock had stopped hours ago, but I kept driving anyway. The forest pressed close on either side. The fog moved like pale water across the glass. I remember glancing at the passenger seat, empty. But I thought I saw movement. Just for a second. That's when the radio turned on, a click. Soft static humming through the speakers. But my car had no power. The ignition was off. The battery. Dead since morning, I froze. The dial glowed faint green. Numbers spun across it like restless eyes. And then a whisper, my name, drawn out. Slow, like it had been waiting. The static shifted. Broken syllables twisting into coordinates. A road, a direction, a place I didn't know. I gripped the wheel tighter, tried to breathe slow, but the voice kept threading through the static, repeating the numbers, repeating my name. I thought about pulling over, leaving the car there in the fog. But the radio, it laughed, not loud, not human. Just the crackling edge of laughter folded into white noise, mocking, pulling. The coordinates burned in my mind. I didn't want to follow them. But my hands turned the wheel anyway. The road narrowed. Branches scraped the sides of the car. The headlights caught pale mist, but nothing beyond it. Only the path forward. Only the voice guiding me. My chest felt hollow. Every mile was slower than the last. Every breath tasted of iron. The radio grew louder. Static swallowing the silence. Words bending into whispers. Fragments of memory. Things only I should have known. Childhood places. Forgotten nights. Moments no one else had seen, I whispered back once. Just once. Who are you? The speakers hissed. And then the same laughter, thinner, colder. The road ended at the cliffs. I hadn't been there in years. But I remembered. The overlook. The rocks falling away into black water. The fog was waiting. It hung thick and low, glowing faint green like something alive. Breathing. I left the car door open. The radio still humming, still whispering. Its light stretched across the seat. Unmoving. The air outside was damp. It clung to my clothes, my skin. Every step closer to the edge felt like I was walking inside a dream. The whispers followed. Not from the car anymore, from the fog itself. Threads of my name pulling through the air. I leaned forward. The green light shifted below the cliff. Not water, not rocks. Something moving, slow as a tide. The fog swelled. And in it, faces, soft outlines pressed against the mist. Eyes half open, mouths parting as if to breathe, or to speak. My chest tightened. I stumbled back. But the laughter returned. This time not from the radio. It echoed from the cliff face. From the fog itself, the pale glow flickered, like a signal waiting to be answered, like it wanted me to step closer. I don't remember leaving. I only remember the silence when I woke in my car. The radio dead again, dark, as if it had never turned on. The road behind me was gone. Only fog, only the empty hum in my ears, and sometimes when I drive alone, the speakers click alive again, just long enough for a breath, just long enough for a voice to say my name, before the static takes it back. The fire had gone low. Only embers now, a faint crackle in the dark. I was alone in the valley. A small tent, a single pack. The kind of silence that settles too heavily on the chest. Above me, the ridge rose like a black wall, jagged, sharp against the pale sky. The moon hung behind it, cold, almost metallic. I remember pulling the blanket tighter around my shoulders, feeling the dry grass under me. The way the earth seemed to exhale, slow, damp, alive. That's when I noticed them. Figures. Thin, standing along the ridge, perfectly still. At first I thought they were trees. Bent stumps, maybe, but the line was too clean. Too human. I blinked. And the shape at the far left had shifted. Closer. Down the slope, just slightly. I told myself I was tired, that shadows play tricks. But my breath had already slowed. My chest, tight, the fire popped. A piece of wood fell inward. And in that burst of orange, I counted them. 7. 7 figures. Evenly spaced, watching. I rubbed my eyes. The night hummed with insects. And when I looked back, 6 stood at the ridge. The 7th was lower. I couldn't see their faces, only outlines cut from the moonlight. But the air carried something, like a weight, like silence stretched too far. I tried to focus on my breath, steady, in, out, pretend I wasn't looking, pretend I wasn't alone. But every blink betrayed me. The 6 became 5, then 4. Each time I opened my eyes, they had slipped closer. By midnight, they stood at the tree line. Black against black, waiting, I whispered to myself, that they weren't real, that I'd wake and laugh. But the grass leaned toward them as if stirred by their presence. The fire died completely, only ash now, and the ridge seemed taller, as though it leaned over me. I sat frozen, afraid to close my eyes, afraid to keep them open. At some point, I must have drifted, or maybe I only blinked too long, because when I raised my head, they were gone from the tree line. Gone. The valley stretched empty. Still. I thought maybe they'd left. But when I turned, my throat closed. One stood by the tent, so close I could see the faintest curve of its shoulder. The pale rim of moonlight against what should have been a face. And then, nothing. A blackout. Like sleep stolen too quickly. When the pale wash of dawn reached me, the valley was empty. No figures, no shadows, no trace of what had stood there, but the earth. The earth told another story. Just beyond the tent, the soil was pressed down, not by feet. Not by any shape I could name, circles, wide, perfect, as though something vast had leaned down and rested, watching. I touched the edges. The dirt was cold, damp, though the night had been dry, and deeper than any footprint. I counted them. 7. 7 circles, pressed into the earth where the watchers had stood. The valley felt hollow, drained of air, as if something had fed on the silence and left only its shell. I packed quickly, hands trembling. Each rustle of fabric felt too loud. Each step toward the trail carried me away, but never far enough. Even now, when I close my eyes, I see that ridge. The line of figures cut sharp against the moon, and sometimes I feel the ground give softly beneath me, as though another circle is waiting to be made, waiting for me to blink. It was late autumn. The air carried that sharp chill, the kind that stings the lungs. I was walking the old trail behind the ridge. No one ever used it anymore. The ground was soft with wet leaves, and fog clung low to the earth. I remember my boots sinking slightly, each step swallowed by silence. The forest was darker than it should have been. The moon was thin, pale, hanging just enough to outline the treetops. That's when I saw it, a light, far ahead. At first, I thought it was a hiker, someone carrying a lantern, swaying gently as they walked. I felt relief. It had been hours since I'd seen another soul. The lantern glowed faintly golden, a warm color, soft against the mist. It bobbed side to side. Like someone's careful steps, I called out. Just a simple word. Hello, but the lantern didn't pause. It didn't answer. Instead, it dimmed, the glow shrinking like a flame starved of air. I stopped walking. My throat tightened, because there wasn't anyone there. The lantern hung, hovering in the fog, unheld. I told myself it was a trick of my eyes, the way mist distorts things. I blinked hard, but it stayed. Floating, the light drifted closer, slowly, as though the air itself carried it forward. A faint hum followed with it, low, barely audible. Like a voice beneath breath, I wanted to step back, but my legs held me in place. The hum grew clearer, not words. Not music, just vibration inside my chest. The lantern swayed once more side to side. Closer now. The glass was old, smudged, dust clinging to its frame, but no hand, no figure, only the light. I whispered my own name without meaning to, as though answering something, some call I couldn't hear. The lantern pulsed, bright, then dim, like a heartbeat. I realized I wasn't breathing. The trail around me felt heavier, as if the trees bent in closer. The fog thickened until my skin felt damp with it. The hum deepened. I felt it through the soil, through my boots, through my ribs. I wanted to run, but the moment I thought it, the lantern paused. It hovered just a few feet away, the glow washing pale light across the leaves, and in that light there were no shadows. Not mine. Not the trees. Only blank ground washed smooth in golden haze. I looked up. The lantern's flame tilted as though peering down at me. I swear the hum carried a sigh. Then the flame flickered once and vanished. The fog swallowed the trail whole. Nothing remained. No light, no sound, just me, alone, with the damp leaves underfoot, and the silence pressing against my ears. I walked the rest of the way without looking up. Even now, I still feel that humming settled inside my chest, waiting to rise again. Like the lantern is still swaying somewhere, just beyond sight. It was late winter when I wandered too far from the trail. The snow was deep but not fresh. Hard, uneven, like frozen waves beneath my boots. The trees leaned close, their branches black against a pale sky. Every step felt heavier, like the forest wanted me to stop. But there was a light ahead. Faint, flickering, a fire. Or at least that's what it looked like. I thought I was alone in those woods. No other footprints, no signs of camps or hunters. Yet through the fog of my breath, I saw the glow. At first, I felt relief. A fire meant warmth. A fire meant people. But when I got closer, my relief thinned into confusion. The logs were burning red. A campfire, yes, but each blackened stick was coated in a sheen of ice. Frost clung to the wood, sparkling, crystalline, while beneath, the embers glowed hot enough to sting my eyes. The snow around the fire should have melted, but instead, it had hardened like glass. My boots crunched over it, sharp as broken ice. Then I saw them, figures, sitting in a ring around the fire, still, quiet, their shapes blurred by the steam rising off the strange flames. I froze. My heart pressed hard against my ribs, but the figures didn't move. Not at first, they looked human. Their heads tilted slightly as though watching the fire, hands resting on knees, bodies outlined in the soft glow. I wanted to call out, but something in me refused. My throat stayed closed. I only breathed, slow, shallow. The heat reached me then. It was unbearable. Though the air was bitter cold, the ground beneath the fire burned. The soles of my boots began to soften. I could feel the warmth seeping up through the leather. Every instinct told me to step back, but I couldn't. Because the figures turned all at once. Their heads shifted toward me, slow, like bending reeds. And their faces. No, not faces, just pale steam. Lifting from hollow shapes, empty, transparent, like breath caught in cold air, but holding form. I stumbled back. My heel cracked through the frozen crust of snow. The sound echoed sharp in the silence, and then they vanished. Not into the dark, not into the trees. They dissolved, like smoke drawn back into the fire. I was left staring at empty logs, the frost still clinging to them. The embers still alive. I should have run, but instead I lingered, watching the glow, feeling the heat bite at my boots. There was something about that fire. A pull, a strange rhythm like breathing, as though it wanted me to sit down, to take a place in the circle. The woods pressed in tighter, the silence heavier. And in that stillness, I thought I heard it, a whisper. It came not from the trees, not from the wind, but from the fire itself, crackling soft words I couldn't understand. A voice woven into the hiss of steam. I leaned closer, too close. The heat burned my skin even from where I stood. But I couldn't step away. The whisper bent itself into something clearer. Not a word, but a memory. My memory? A mistake I had buried years ago. One I had promised myself I'd forget. Yet there it was, spilling from the fire. I staggered back. The flames bent higher, bending like hands reaching. And then, just as suddenly, they dimmed. The light shrank into the ash. The frost melted away. The circle of snow cracked, blackened, and the heat fled. All that remained was the faint smell of smoke. And silence. I stood there for a long time, afraid to move. The fire was gone. The figures were gone. But the warmth stayed in my boots, as though the ground itself still remembered me. I never found the trail again that night. I wandered until dawn, following shadows. When the sun rose, the forest was still. The fire was nowhere to be found. But even now, when the nights are cold and the silence feels too heavy, I can still feel the heat rising, as though the fire is waiting for me to sit down and take my place in the circle. The mountain pass was quiet that night. Thin air, a pale moon hanging low, its light falling like frost across the stone. I walked slowly, boots pressing into the brittle gravel. The wind tugged at my jacket, but there was no other movement, just me and the silence, until he appeared. A figure standing ahead, half hidden in the curve of the path. Not moving, not speaking. I thought he might be a hiker, someone lost in the cold. But as I drew nearer, my steps slowed, his head tilted toward me as though listening. But there was no face. Where the features should have been, there was only smoothness, pale and still, like glass. My throat tightened. I tried to speak, a greeting, a question. But no sound came. He raised one hand, a slow, deliberate gesture. A beckoning, and then he turned, walking toward the dark ridge. I should have left. I should have turned back, but my legs followed him. Quietly, step by step. The trail narrowed, rocks slick with frost. Each turn felt hidden, as if no map had ever known it. And always he was a few paces ahead, never looking back, never stumbling. The air grew thinner. My chest ached. Still I climbed. There were moments when the wind carried strange whispers. Not words, but something soft, like breath against stone. I glanced upward. Clouds shifted across the moon. The path glowed faintly in its light. The faceless man lifted his hand again. This time he pointed. Not to me, not to the ground, but to the sky. I froze. Above us the stars were gone. In their place, shapes. They hovered in silence, vast and weightless, their edges blurred like smoke folding into itself. Not birds, not clouds. I couldn't tell if they were close or impossibly far. They pulsed, faintly glowing. Each movement stirred the air around me, though nothing touched my skin. The faceless man stood still beside me, his smooth head tilted upward, as if he had seen this before, as if this was what he had always wanted me to find. I wanted to ask him. I wanted to demand an answer. But my voice stayed trapped inside me. The shapes above us shifted again. Slow arcs, silent patterns drifting against the void. A sense of wonder pressed into me, and dread too. As if I was not meant to see this, as if no one was. My heart beat louder, slower, like it was being pulled into their rhythm. I tried to look away, to blink. But every time I closed my eyes, the shapes burned brighter in the dark behind them. When I turned, the faceless man was closer. His blank surface reflected the pale glow above. No mouth, but I felt him whisper, not through sound, through the cold air itself. Follow. The word wasn't spoken, but I heard it inside my chest. I stepped back, shaking my head. The gravel shifted underfoot, and in that tiny sound, the hovering shapes seemed to pause, as though they heard me. I dared not move again. My breath was thin, the silence heavy. And yet, the faceless man pointed upward once more. His hand did not tremble. I don't remember how long I stood there. Minutes, hours. The air held me still. When the moon slid behind the ridge, the shapes faded like mist dissolving, one by one, until only the stars remained. The faceless man lowered his hand, and slowly, without sound, he began to walk back down the trail. I wanted to follow. I wanted to demand answers, but my body stayed rooted in place, too heavy to move. I watched him vanish into the pale fog that clung to the rocks, and I was alone again, only the sky above me, and the faint memory of what had been there. I don't know if I truly saw it, or if he showed me something that should never be remembered, but sometimes, when the night is clear, I catch myself staring upward, and the stars don't look the same anymore. The nights were longer that summer. The hills were dry, and the air carried a pale warmth even after sunset. I had walked farther than usual, chasing nothing, just silence. That's when I found it. A narrow gap in the limestone, half hidden by weeds, the shape of a cave, breathing cool air against my skin. I stepped closer. The ground was uneven, marked with pale stones. Inside, it was darker than it should have been. I leaned in, and for no reason at all, I whispered my own name. The sound slipped into the hollow, then came the return. A faint echo, stretched, slower, heavier than I spoke it. My breath caught. I tried again, a louder call. The cave breathed it back to me, dragged down, thick with weight. It wasn't just an echo. It was delayed, distorted, as if the stone itself had spoken, not the air. I laughed nervously, though no one was there. The sound fell into the dark. And again it returned, deeper than before. Each time I called, each time I sent something into the void, the cave gave it back, but not the same. Never the same. I whispered a word I hadn't said in years, a name I kept hidden, buried in memory. The cave repeated it, almost perfect. Almost. There was a crack in the syllables, a wrongness like an old recording. I stepped inside. The air grew colder, damp on my skin. The silence pressed around me like water. I called again. This time, the cave answered faster. The voice was closer, too close, as if standing only a few feet away. I felt the back of my neck prickle. I told myself it was just sound, just the walls bending it back. But the pause between us was too human, like it was waiting, like it was listening. I tried to stop, but something in me wanted to hear it again, to test how far it would follow, so I whispered once more. And the cave didn't return my words at all. It said something else, something I had not spoken. My name, followed by a phrase I knew too well, a sentence from a memory I had never shared aloud. I froze. The air had gone still, no trace of wind. Even my breath seemed to vanish before it touched the stone. The silence stretched. And then, a soft rustle deeper in the cave, like fabric dragging against rock. I stepped back. The voice came again, clearer. This time it wasn't even delayed. It spoke in my tone. Exact. But not from the hollow anymore. From beside me. From just behind my shoulder. I couldn't move. The earth felt heavy beneath my shoes. The pale light outside seemed farther than before. The cave had stopped breathing. But the voice kept speaking, repeating my name, slower, softer, like it wanted me closer, like it wanted me inside. I backed away. My footsteps cracked over loose stone. Yet each step echoed too loudly, as if someone else had matched them. At the cave's mouth, I turned once more. The darkness seemed to pulse, a living shadow, and for the first time, the echo came without me calling. It whispered one last word. Not my name. Not anything I had ever spoken. Just a soft command. A single word that felt older than language. Stay. The hills were silent as I left. The night air was warm again, but in the distance, faint and low. I thought I still heard my own voice calling after me. And I walked faster, because I wasn't sure if it was still mine. It was past midnight, The highway was almost empty. Just me, the hum of the tires and the faint rhythm of rain. The world outside felt like it had been swallowed by fog. Streetlights, bent into pale halos, dissolving as soon as they appeared. Each one passing, softer, weaker. I hadn't spoken in hours. My throat was dry. The silence in the car was thick enough to notice. I drove with the window cracked just enough to feel the cool air. It slid against my skin like damp cloth. Heavy, cold, then, in the rearview mirror, movement. At first I thought it was nothing, just the rolling blur of headlights. But then I saw the outline. A figure, sitting in the back seat. Fog clung to their body like a second skin. My chest tightened. I didn't hear the door open. I didn't feel the weight shift. Yet there they were. I kept my eyes forward, hands locked around the wheel. But the mirror kept pulling me back. A pale face, eyes lowered, lips closed and still. I heard the whisper. Turn left. It wasn't a voice in the air. It pressed directly into my head, as if my own thoughts were betraying me. But the lips didn't move. I gripped the wheel harder, my knuckles stiff, frozen white. There was no left turn, just road, just fog. Turn left. The whisper came again. Gentle, patient, as though it knew I would obey. I blinked, and for a second, the road seemed to bend, an opening, a shadow path leading into the trees. But when I looked again, it was gone. Only asphalt stretching into nowhere. The figure in the back didn't shift, didn't breathe, didn't exist. And yet it filled the entire car. I told myself not to look, not to check the mirror again. But my eyes betrayed me. Their head was closer now, tilted, leaning toward me, though their body never moved. The whisper slid across my skin, a damp hand I couldn't brush away, straight ahead. Keep going. My chest ached. I wanted to stop, to pull over, to run. But the thought of opening the door, the thought of stepping into that fog, felt worse. So I kept driving, through silence, through breathless miles, through a night that refused to end. Every so often the whisper returned. So soft it almost blended with the rain. Right, faster, don't slow down. Hours blurred. I don't remember the roads. I don't remember my own thoughts. Only the voice that wasn't a voice. And then, the sky began to pale. Dawn stretched its weak arms through the mist, soft blue leaking into the horizon. I dared to look again. The mirror was empty, the seat behind me bare. No fog, no shadow. For the first time all night, I exhaled. My chest felt lighter, my skin less cold. The silence in the car was just silence again. But when I pulled into the empty rest stop and opened the back door, the seat was wet, beaded, with condensation, as though someone had been there for hours, breathing, waiting. I closed the door slowly. The echo rang louder than it should have, and in the quiet, I still felt them, as if they had only stepped out for a moment and might return once the fog thickened again. The air in the mountains was colder than I expected. Late autumn, thin light pressing down through bare branches. I remember the silence most of all, just the steady rush of water, a mountain stream cutting through stone. Its voice was soft, almost tired. I knelt to drink, hands pressed against the smooth rock at the edge. My reflection bent and rippled, but something else caught my eye. At first, I thought it was just pale stone, a shape caught in the current. But as I leaned closer, I saw fingers, thin, almost translucent, a hand. It rose out of the dark water as if it were reaching. Not grasping, not trembling, just pointing, its fingers extended downstream, so still, so certain. I waited, expecting movement, expecting it to vanish with the current. But it stayed there. Cold spread across my arms. The stream hissed against stone, and still, the pale hand remained. I should have walked away, but something urged me. That finger was showing me something. I stepped into the water. The chill cut straight into my bones. Rocks shifted beneath my shoes. The current pulled, but softly. I followed where it pointed. The further I went, the quieter the world became. No birds, no rustling, only the stream, and a faint glow beneath the surface. It started as a shimmer, a blue haze between the stones, almost like moonlight caught under water. But the sun was still above the ridge, and there was no moon yet. I bent down. The glow seemed to pulse, not brighter, not dimmer, just alive. Every step downstream, the light spread, slipping beneath pebbles, breathing between cracks in the stone. I glanced back once. The hand was gone, only water rushing behind me, only silence pressing in. The blue light was clearer now, not scattered, not random. It gathered into lines, as though the stream itself was etched with veins of fire, thin strands, curling between rocks, moving like roots beneath the water. I walked slower, afraid the light would notice me, afraid it already had. The air felt heavy. My breath came out white, and every step made the glow tighten. Drawing me onward, I tried to stop, to turn back, but the stream bent sharply, and there, between the rocks, the light pooled, a hollow in the stream bed. Stones worn smooth like something had turned in them for years. The glow pressed out of that hollow, rising, swirling, pale blue against the dusk. It looked almost like a face, not sharp, not clear, just a mouth, half open beneath the current. I stepped back. The water hissed louder, as if warning me, but I couldn't look away. The mouth shifted, not moving, just reshaping with the glow, like a whisper held in silence, like words I couldn't hear. The current bent around me, dragging at my ankles, pulling me closer. I shut my eyes. For a moment there was nothing but rushing, and the faint hum of something deep below. When I opened them, the light was gone. The hollow was dark again. Only the stream. Only stone. I turned and walked back, quickly this time. Cold pressing against my ribs, every breath sharp. When I reached the place where I'd first seen it, the hand was there again, still pale, still pointing downstream. I stumbled out of the water, onto the bank, and when I looked back a final time, the hand was gone. Only ripples on the stream, only the faint sound of water rushing on. But even now, when I close my eyes, I see that finger, and I know it was never pointing at the stream. It was pointing at me. The night was clear, crisp air still and thin. No clouds, no wind. Just the quiet stretch of autumn, holding its breath. I had wandered further than usual, fields behind the house, brittle grass brushing my ankles, every step soft, swallowed by the wide silence. I remember looking up, expecting the same cold sky I'd seen all my life. But it wasn't the same. The stars looked brighter, sharper, as if someone had wiped the glass of the world clean. Too many of them, scattered like silver dust. For a moment I was filled with awe, an endless map above me, a calm so deep it felt almost holy. I lay back on the ground. The soil was damp, the scent of earth clinging to me, and I stared. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks. A cluster of stars, drifting, not twinkling but shifting, slow, deliberate, almost like a school of fish beneath the surface of a black ocean. I blinked. The stars held their place, but when I focused again, they weren't where I left them. I sat up, my breath caught in my throat, and still. The movement continued. They weren't falling, not shooting stars, not meteors. They were arranging themselves. Lines became curves. Curves bent into an outline, and in the vast ceiling of night, a shape began to emerge. An eye, perfectly formed, unblinking, rimmed with scattered light. The stars were its lashes. The black void was its pupil, and it stared down at me with a stillness that pressed against my chest. I whispered to myself, "No." But the silence carried it away. The longer I looked, the clearer it became. Not illusion, not imagination. It was watching. And then, the eyelid moved, stars shifted in unison, sliding downward. A slow, soundless blink. Like the sky itself had skin. My body felt heavy, pinned by its gaze. The field around me no longer safe, no longer mine. I wanted to stand, to run. But my legs refused. Every nerve hummed, caught in its stare. The stars twitched again, another blink. This time slower. Lingering. The air grew colder. A strange hum threaded through the silence. I could feel it vibrating in my ribs, deep and low. The eye widened, stretched wider than anything human. An endless swallowing gaze. I pressed my hands into the soil. Dirt wedged under my nails, but the ground felt unsteady, almost pulsing beneath me. Everywhere I turned, the sky followed. No matter how small I tried to make myself, I couldn't slip out of its vision. It was alive, and it wanted me to know. The blinking slowed. Each pause between movements felt longer, like it was deciding, measuring, then, just as suddenly, stillness. The stars held their places again. An ordinary sky. Quiet. I sat there trembling, breath shallow, wondering if I had lost myself in some dream. But the awe had curdled into dread. Every star above me seemed sharper now, like countless tiny eyes waiting for the chance to move again. I walked home without looking up. Every step careful, every shadow too loud, even now. When I glance at the night sky, I wonder if it's truly stars I see, or if it's waiting, patient, for me to look too long and be seen again. The trees leaned close that night, branches like crooked fingers. It was late. Too late to keep walking. The air smelled of damp pine, cold earth under my boots. The fog had thickened until the trail was only a pale ribbon ahead of me. I was tired. Every step felt heavier. I wanted only to reach my camp, to sleep, and then, through the blur of the trees, I saw it, a flicker of fabric between trunks, canvas catching the weak glow of my lantern. A tent relief washed over me. But as I moved closer, my chest tightened. It was my tent. The same color, the same lean in the frame, even the fold in the flap. I knew it. I froze. I hadn't reached that spot yet. I had been walking in the opposite direction. Still, there it was. My camp. The fire pit was cold, scattered with ash. My folding chair tilted just the way I had left it, and on the small crate beside it, my notebook. I reached for it with trembling hands. The cover was damp with dew. When I opened it, the words inside were my handwriting, pages of thoughts, dates that matched exactly. I stared at the ink. Dark, familiar, mine. The fog pressed tighter around the camp. Every tree seemed closer, watching. I whispered to myself. Maybe I had circled back without realizing. Maybe exhaustion had twisted the trail, but deep inside, I knew that wasn't true. I stepped toward the tent. The zipper was half open, a dark mouth in the pale canvas. I crouched, pushing the flap aside. Inside was my bag, my blanket folded at the corner. My boots lined up neatly, laces tucked. I touched them. Cold, still damp from yesterday's stream crossing, and then my eyes drifted lower. The sleeping bag. It was zipped shut. A shape inside it, rising and falling. Breath. I froze, knees locked. My pulse echoed in my ears. The lantern light wavered against the walls, and the figure shifted, just slightly, as if dreaming. I wanted to speak, to whisper anything. but my throat closed. That bag, it was mine. The same tear near the foot, the same faint stain from spilled coffee. I backed away, slow as I could. Every step seemed to stir the air. The zipper trembled faintly. Outside, the fog pulsed with silence. Even the insects were gone. Only my breath, too loud, too fast. I tried to tell myself it was a stranger, a wanderer who found the camp. But the notes, the bag, the boots, they were mine. I stopped at the edge of the trees. The tent stood quiet, still. And then, from within, the zipper began to close. Not fast, not sharp, just slow. A careful hand drawing it up from the inside. I turned. The forest waited, empty, dense, every path swallowed in mist. My lantern flickered. I wanted to run, but if I ran, where would I go? Behind me, the tent was sealed. No breath of light escaping, no sound, only silence, and the faint impression that whoever was inside was now awake. I stood there until my legs shook, too afraid to step forward, too afraid to turn away, and in that stillness, one thought circled again and again. If this camp wasn't mine, then where was the one I left behind? The fog carried no answer, only the weight of someone else, breathing softly in a space that should have been mine. The air was colder than it should have been. Late autumn, the kind of night where the streetlights feel too far apart. I stood alone, my breath rising in pale clouds, soft fog curling upward, vanishing into the dark, but it didn't vanish. The first time I thought nothing of it, just the cold clinging. But the smoke-like mist hung there, longer than it should, suspended, shimmering faintly in the pale glow. I exhaled again. And that's when I heard it, a faint hiss, like static. Not in the air, not from a speaker, but from me, from my own mouth. I froze, holding my breath. The silence wrapped tight around me. But when I let it out again, that same soft static, crackling in the night, it wasn't natural. It wasn't wind. It wasn't my imagination. I leaned forward, watching the fog escape my lips. And inside the hiss, I thought I heard words not in English, not in anything I could recognize. Broken fragments, low, whispering, almost like two stations colliding on an old radio dial. I pressed my hand to my chest. My heartbeat felt wrong. Each inhale rattled. Each exhale hummed. I tried to steady it. Breathe slow, breathe quiet. But the slower I breathed, the clearer the voices became. They were speaking to me. I was sure of it. Even if I couldn't understand, the fog curled tighter now, not drifting up, but bending back, turning, leaning toward me. I stepped back. And the mist followed, like smoke attached to my skin. Each breath I let out clung closer, gathering, thickening, a pale cloud with weight, almost forming shapes. My throat tightened. I tried to hold it in, but the pressure burned. I couldn't. I let it out in one trembling gasp, and the hiss grew louder, sharp, clattering with voices, layer after layer of whispers, some too deep, others too shrill, overlapping, feeding through my own lungs. I stumbled to the edge of the street. The lamps buzzed faintly above, but in that buzz, I realized something. The sound was the same, static everywhere. I pressed my hands over my mouth, but the noise didn't stop. It leaked through the cracks of my fingers, soft whispers, clawing out with every beat of my chest. I thought of running, but the night around me had gone still. No cars, no footsteps, no wind, just me, and the static. It echoed now, not only when I exhaled, but in every shallow inhale too, like the air around me was already corrupted. Already carrying the signal, I bent forward, coughing hard. But instead of sound, a sharp burst escaped, like a radio snapping to life. And this time, I understood just one word, soft, dragged out, carved into my bones. Stay! The fog trembled. It didn't drift anymore. It clung to my shoulders, slid down my arms, wrapped around my legs. Every breath I gave only fed it. Every exhale gave it shape, until I wasn't sure where my body ended. And the mist began. The whispers calmed. Quieter now, but constant, like something waiting. Patient. I stood in the middle of that silent street, cold air pressing in, and all I could hear was the static in my breath, and it hasn't stopped since. The air was thin that morning, High in the ridges, where the pine gave way to gray stone, the trail wound upward in sharp turns, each step slower than the last. I remember the silence. No birdsong, just the faint scrape of my boots and the cairns, little towers of stone, stacked carefully along the trail at uneven distances, each one leaning just slightly as though they had been built a long time ago. At first, I thought nothing of them. Hikers mark trails. People leave signs behind. But these were different. They weren't on the path. They were pressed into it. Embedded like teeth in the dirt, I leaned closer to one. The stones were cold, even though the sun touched them. And there was a hum, low, steady, like the faint vibration of wires. But there were no wires. I told myself it was wind. Wind slipping between cracks. Wind trapped in hollow spaces. But the air was still, completely still. The higher I climbed, the more cairns appeared. Dozens of them, stacked high like watchful figures. Some leaning so far they should have fallen. The hum deepened. Not all at once. Each cairn had its own tone. And as I passed, they layered together. A strange, uneven chord, I felt it inside my ribs, a vibration pressing into me. As if the stones were pushing sound through bone, I stopped at one shape taller than the rest. The topmost rock was smooth, flat, pale. It looked heavy, far too heavy to balance where it sat. But it didn't move. I reached out and froze. The hum shifted. From low to high, thin, piercing, it sounded like a cry. I pulled my hand back. The cairn trembled just slightly. Dust spilled between the stones. The path stretched ahead. More towers, more humming. All waiting. I kept walking. I didn't want to stop. But the wind picked up. Just a small gust. Enough to brush across my face. Enough to move the pines far below. And the cairns screamed not in words, not in voices I could place, but in a long, tearing wail. It rolled down the trail, stone to stone, cairn to cairn, each one answering the other. The ground vibrated. Loose pebbles shifted under my boots. I felt it in the soil, like something crawling beneath. I covered my ears. It didn't matter. The scream was not in the air. It was inside the earth. I stumbled forward too fast. The path tilted, rocks sliding under me. And I heard one of the cairns collapse. I turned. Stones lay scattered in the dust. The stack was gone. But the sound, the wail, it kept going. It rose from the dirt itself, from the broken pile, from the hollow spaces in the ground. I wanted to run. But the trail narrowed, pressed against the cliff face. Nowhere to go but forward. The cairns shook with every gust, and every gust became a scream, each louder, sharper, more ragged. I passed one leaning so close the shadow fell across me. I thought I saw movement, not the stones shifting, but something in the cracks, dark slivers, like fingers curling between the gaps. The next cairn had already fallen, but it was still crying, its voice thin and broken, rattling up from the soil. The wind rose again. The whole ridge seemed to answer, not just the cairns, the mountain itself. I dropped to one knee, clutching the earth. It was humming beneath me, a steady vibration, not random, not natural, like a note held too long, a sound that shouldn't last. And yet it went on. The cairns ahead leaned further. One by one they tipped, rocks sliding free, tumbling down the slope. But even when they shattered, even when nothing stood upright, their voices stayed. The dirt trembled with every pitch. The scream unbroken, as if the stones had only been masks, and what lived beneath was still singing. I forced myself onward, step by step until the path curved away. The cairns thinned out. The noise softened. At last, the ridge opened to a clearing. Wind moved freely here. The humming faded. Only silence remained. I didn't look back. Not once, but sometimes. When I walk alone at night down empty streets, I hear it again, a faint vibration, rising from the pavement, almost hidden, almost gone, like the stones are still humming, even without their stacks, even without their shapes, still crying through the soil, still waiting beneath my feet. The air was thin that morning. Autumn had taken most of the leaves, leaving only branches, rattling in the wind. I started walking the trail I knew so well. It wound through the pines, a path carved into my memory. I had walked it since I was a child. Every turn felt familiar. Every stone was where it should be, but the silence was strange. No birds, no insects, only my own shoes pressing into the damp earth. I followed the curve past the stream, where moss coated the rocks. The water was still, almost frozen. Even though the air wasn't cold enough, something about the light felt off, pale, not golden, not dim, like the sky itself had gone colorless. The trail bent again, and then it didn't. It ended, abruptly, at the edge of a cliff I had never seen before. The earth was cut clean, like the trail had been sliced in half with a knife. Loose gravel slid off into the void. I froze, because I knew this trail. I had walked it hundreds of times, and there had never been a cliff here. My chest tightened. I stepped closer, careful. The ground beneath my feet crumbled softly into dust. I leaned forward, and that's when I saw it. More trail. Directly beneath me, not flat, not on solid ground, but suspended. Upside down, like a reflection that wasn't water. It curved through the forest beneath the cliff, identical to the one I was standing on, but inverted. Wrong. My breath fogged the air, even though it wasn't cold. And I realized I was staring down into a second sky, because beneath the upside-down trail, there were trees. And they hung downward, their roots stretching into empty air. I blinked. The image didn't fade. The trail continued far below, winding deeper into an inverted forest, and for a moment, I thought I saw someone, a figure, walking slowly, head bent. Their steps perfectly aligned with mine. I shifted my weight. The figure shifted, too. Every move mirrored beneath me, as if it were me. The pale light trembled. The silence thickened. I could hear my own heartbeat pressing against my ears. I tried to step back, but the ground resisted. My heel met nothing but soft, crumbling dirt. It felt like the trail itself was urging me forward. Toward the edge. Toward that impossible reflection, I whispered aloud just to hear sound. The words didn't matter. But beneath me, the figure's lips moved too, perfectly, silently, repeating me. The pale forest swayed. The upside-down trees rattled with a wind I couldn't feel. And then, the figure looked up. Its face was mine, but drained of color. Skin stretched pale. Eyes, too wide. The reflection smiled. I didn't. The silence cracked. A faint hum rose in my ears, trembling through my jaw. Like static trying to form a voice. The ground shuddered once. Pebbles slid into the air below, and didn't fall. They drifted upward like ash pulled into a flame. The inverted version of me raised a hand, slowly. Reaching up through the hollow space, my knees buckled. The trail felt thinner. Like it wouldn't hold my weight. I stepped back, gasping. And suddenly the cliff was empty again. No mirrored trail. No inverted forest. Just rocks, jagged and dark, dropping into endless fog. The silence returned. Heavy, almost relieved, but I didn't feel safe. Because the trail was still gone. The cliff was real. And when I turned to retrace my steps, the forest behind me had shifted. The trees were closer, branches reaching, the air trembling with that faint, static hum. I never found the end of that trail again. Every path I take leads me back to the cliff, and I know if I look down, that pale reflection will be waiting, still smiling, still reaching, still walking when I don't. The trail was quiet. Pine needles softened every step. The late summer air was heavy. Still, I walked alone, a worn backpack on my shoulders, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. The trees swayed, but only slightly. No wind, just that strange hush you sometimes find when the world feels like it's waiting. I stopped at a bend. The light was pale, filtering through the canopy. For a moment, I thought I heard someone behind me, a breath, a soft crunch of soil. But when I turned, nothing. I moved on, faster this time, every step echoing more than it should. Then I saw him, a man standing where the path narrowed, clothes rough from travel, shoes stained with dust. He smiled. And when he spoke, I froze because his voice was mine. Every syllable, every tone, as if I had spoken through him. "Hello?" he said, and it wasn't just similar. It was exact. The laugh that followed, even that nervous break, was the same sound I'd heard spill from my own throat 100 times before. I felt something in my chest pull tight, like I had stepped outside myself, and was watching from far away. I tried to answer, but he spoke again, first. repeating my thought before it left my lips, word for word, perfectly mirrored, as though he had been rehearsing me. The trees around us blurred. The silence thickened, and I could hear only, "Us," he tilted his head, his smile never shifting. "Trade places," he whispered. The words crawled inside me, like I had already said them, like I had wanted them. His eyes never blinked. And when I shifted back a step, he shifted forward. In rhythm, each breath he drew, I matched without meaning to. Each small movement of his hand, I felt echo in mine. It was no longer conversation. It was rehearsal. And I was the one being copied. I muttered something low, anything to break the reflection. But even my stumbles, he returned. The air grew colder. The shadows stretched longer. I wanted to turn away, but his voice kept me still. Trade places. The same phrase, soft, patient, as if the words weren't an offer but a promise. I dropped my gaze. The ground swam, and for a moment, I saw two sets of footprints, both mine, pressed deep into the soil, leading from behind me. To where he stood, I ran. I don't remember deciding to. I don't remember my feet moving, only the rush of my own breath chasing itself through the trees. Branches clawed at my arms. The forest tilted, spun, and still. I heard him, my laugh, my breath, my voice behind me, steady, unbroken. I didn't stop. Not until the trail opened and the world felt wider again. By the time I reached the road, my chest burned. The silence returned. I never saw him step from the woods, but I knew he hadn't stayed behind. Nights since then, I've caught myself speaking and hearing the echo a heartbeat too late. A laugh from across the room when I live alone. A whisper in the phone line, matching my own words. Sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I hesitate. Just long enough to wonder if the reflection is waiting for me to trade places. The grass was damp. The meadow stretched wide, silvered under the pale night sky. Mist lingered, curling low as if the earth itself exhaled. I walked slowly. The air felt softer here. Heavier, too. Each step pressed into the ground with a quiet squelch, leaving the scent of wet soil rising behind me. It was then that I noticed them, small lights, hovering low across the grass. Round, glowing orbs, faintly pulsing. They looked harmless, gentle, almost like lanterns placed by someone long gone. But they moved, breathing in slow rhythm. As if asleep, the hum of crickets faltered. A hush rolled across the meadow, folding itself into my ears. The orbs continued to glow, their light shivering faintly against the fog. I thought they might be fireflies, but fireflies don't stay. They don't hover in patterns, lined out like waiting sentinels. I took a step closer. The nearest orb flickered, pale gold before dimming again. Its pulse slowed. I could feel my own chest tightening, matching its rhythm, as though my breath wanted to follow theirs, as though they were pulling me into their sleep. The night air grew colder. The meadow smelled of iron, faint and metallic beneath the sweetness of grass. I stopped moving. That's when the first orb lifted. It rose with weightless grace, breaking its rhythm of pulsing. The others followed, one by one, drifting upward, then outward. Encircling me, the fog thickened around my legs. I turned just slightly and realized they were no longer asleep. Their light sharpened. Not warm anymore, but pale, thin, searching. Each orb hovering, holding, watching. The silence pressed in. The crickets never returned. Even the trees at the far edge of the meadow stood unnaturally still. The orbs pulsed again. But this time, it wasn't like breath. It was like eyes, opening. I felt my skin prickle as though invisible hands traced along my arms. Not touching, only near. Close enough to sense, I stepped back. The orbs drew in tighter, their circle closing, their lights dimming in unison until the meadow was nothing but shifting shadows. I could hear faint static in the air, not with my ears, but deep inside, like my thoughts were unraveling into a quiet hiss. It filled me, spreading into the base of my skull. I tried to whisper, to call out, but no sound came. The meadow had stolen my voice. The orbs brightened again. Each one pulsed, quick, as if they were answering something unseen, and then I realized they weren't dreaming at all. They never had been. They were watching, wide awake, studying me with the patience of something ancient. I lowered my eyes. I couldn't bear to look at them directly. Their glow cut through the fog, shimmering on the blades of grass, painting every shadow too sharp, too precise. I felt as though I was the intruder here, as though I had stepped into a place where no one was meant to walk. The air hung heavy with waiting, but the orbs didn't touch me. They only floated, steady, unblinking, encircling, and as quickly as they rose, they began to drift back, sinking again toward the earth, lower, softer, until they returned to that quiet rhythm, breathing, sleeping, or pretending to. I stood frozen for a long while. The fog curled tighter around my knees, urging me away. My body finally obeyed. I backed into the darker edge of the meadow, each step careful, measured, afraid to disturb their rest again. The circle loosened, but the silence followed me. By the time I reached the trees, the orbs had dimmed. The meadow glowed faintly like embers in ash. Still pulsing, slow, steady. I never looked back fully, but I felt it. Their gaze lingering on me even as their lights lowered. And in that quiet, I knew they would wait, patient, sleepless beneath the mist, watching, always watching. It was late in the season, the air damp, the kind of evening when fog doesn't rise, but clings low to the ground. The trail had led me to the river crossing. A rope bridge stretched out into the pale mist. Thin planks, dark with moisture, strung together by frayed cords. I stood there a long time, listening to the soft hum of water below. But I couldn't see it. Only the shifting fog. The air was still. Branches around me didn't move. Not a single leaf stirred. And yet, the bridge shivered. At first it was faint, just a vibration under my hand as I tested the rope railing. Like something distant, something heavy pressing upward. I thought it was me, my nerves, the way my pulse sometimes made things blur. But when I stepped onto the first plank, the whole span gave a low, groaning sigh. The ropes creaked. The wood trembled. And yet the air remained silent. No wind to blame. Halfway across, the vibration deepened. It wasn't the quick rattle of footsteps, but a slow, dragging pulse. Almost like breathing, I froze. The bridge swayed once, though nothing touched it. The fog below curled and parted, as if stirred from beneath. I leaned out, gripping the rope until it burned my palm. Through the shifting white, a shape moved. Not sharp, not clear, but massive. The water wasn't smooth. It bulged, something vast rolling just beneath the surface. Each time it turned, the bridge answered with another trembling moan. I tried to move faster, one step, then another. My breath loud against the silence. The rope snapped tight, jerking hard as if weight had landed behind me. I didn't turn. I couldn't, but the plank sagged. Pressed down by something unseen, a second rhythm fell into place. Soft, heavy, walking. The bridge shook harder, not side to side, but downward, dragged from below. I felt the ropes pulling against my hands, straining as though they wanted to slip free. The wood groaned with every step I took, echoing against the fog. Then, silence. The bridge stilled. My body hung suspended, sweat cooling against my neck. Only the faint hum of the river reached me. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it. The strange weight, the unseen steps. I looked ahead. The far side was only a dozen planks away. I stepped forward. The wood splintered faintly beneath me, and then, behind me, a single plank shifted. Slow. Measured, as though someone or something was keeping pace. The fog below drew tighter, a darker shadow circling under the bridge. No ripples, no splash, just a rolling presence following with me. Every step I made, it answered. Wood bowing, ropes straining, an invisible companion crossing beside me. I reached the last 3 planks. My breath quickened. The ground waited just beyond. The bridge trembled in one long, final shudder, like a sigh. And then it stopped. No weight behind me, no shadow below, only stillness. I stepped onto solid earth. The soil felt strange, too firm, as if it had been waiting. I turned at last. The bridge stretched empty into the fog, but the ropes were still swaying. back and forth as though something heavy had just crossed, and then the far end of the bridge where I had started dipped low. One plank pressing down, but there was no one there, only the fog folding quietly in the pale light. I kept walking, not looking back again. Yet even on solid ground I could feel it, the faint vibration still lingering in my bones. The bridge had carried more than me across, and somewhere, deep in the fog, it was still waiting. The watchtower stood at the edge of the forest, a crooked silhouette against the pale September sky. The trees pressed close, but none touched its stone. As if they knew better. I came here when the roads were empty, when the air felt colder than it should have. Just before night settled in, the door was heavy, its wood swollen with rain rotting at the edges. I pushed. It groaned, then gave way. Inside, the dust stirred like ash. Spiderwebs clung to the ceiling beams, and the silence was so complete. It felt like I had stepped into something sealed. At the center of the room stood a clock, tall, iron-framed, its face pale, glass cracked, but it had no hands. Still, it ticked, soft, uneven at first, like the heartbeat of something buried. I thought maybe it was the echo of my boots on the wooden planks. But when I stilled, the ticking continued. Steady, patient. The longer I listened, the louder it grew. Not in the room exactly, but everywhere. In the air, in my teeth, in the soft drum beneath my ribs. I stepped closer. The glass reflected only my outline, blurry, faded, as if I wasn't really standing there. The clock ticked again, and again, each beat striking deeper. Like a pulse pressed against bone, I covered my ears. But the sound did not fade. It moved inside me, a thudding rhythm in my chest. Too strong, too slow. Not mine. My breath shortened. The ticking quickened. I pressed my palm flat against the cold face of the clock. The glass was warm. I staggered back. The wooden stairs behind me creaked, as though something heavy had shifted. But the tower was empty. I was alone, still. Footsteps seemed to trail just above, soft, deliberate, matching the ticking. One step for every beat, I climbed. The spiral stairs wound tight, suffocating. Each turn darker than the last. The ticking filled the stairwell, pressing against my skull. At the top, the narrow room smelled of rust and wet stone. The small windows looked out over the forest. The trees bent in the wind, but I heard no leaves, only the ticking in the center of the floor. Another clock, smaller, its frame cracked. Face white, no hands. It ticked louder than the first. I could feel it in my jaw, in the space behind my eyes. Every beat pulling something from me, every beat asking for silence. The walls seemed to shift with each tick, breathing, closer, then retreating. My hands trembled. The urge to smash the clock rose sharp and sudden, but I knew. If I broke it, the ticking wouldn't stop. It would only move deeper. I turned away, pressing my forehead against the cool stone wall, trying to steady my breath. But in the silence of my inhale, the ticking slipped into rhythm with my lungs. In, tick, out, tick. I pressed my chest, desperate to still it. But the beat went on. I descended step by step. The lower room felt different now, darker, tighter. The first clock no longer ticked. It only hummed faintly, as though it had finished feeding, but the sound followed me out. Into the woods. Into the road. Into the hollow space behind my sternum. At night, when the house quiets, it grows louder. The walls pulse with it. My skin tightens against it. And sometimes, when I look into the mirror, I swear I see faint, pale lines on my chest, like the face of a clock, waiting for hands that never were. The ticking hasn't stopped since, and I don't think it ever will. The snowfall began just after dusk. Thick, heavy. The kind of snow that smothered sound until the whole town felt muted. I walked home slowly, each step sinking deeper than the last. Street lamps glowed pale, their halos blurred in the drifting white. It was quiet. So quiet that even my own breathing felt too loud. That's when I noticed it. A shape in the snowbank across the road. At first I thought it was just wind carved, a ripple in the drift. But when I drew closer, the outline became sharper. It looked like a face, half submerged, the features pressed just beneath the surface, eyes closed, mouth open, like it had been frozen mid-scream. I froze in place, watching, waiting for it to shift. The snow fluttered against my coat. The air stung at my lips, and the face didn't move. I knelt down, brushing the powder away with my glove. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. A perfect face, skin pale as glass. The lips pulled back in a soundless cry. My hand trembled. I blinked, and it was gone. Just a shallow depression remained, as if my eyes had lied to me. Only a hollow where the cheeks should have been. I stood quickly, snow clinging to my knees. Across the road, more shapes caught my attention. One by the corner of the lamppost, another against the side of a parked car, another further down, half hidden by shadow. All of them. Faces, dozens of them, imprinted in the white silence, each with that same expression, mouths parted. Silent cries buried under frost. I felt the breath tighten in my chest. I tried to step back, but the crunch of snow beneath my boots felt unbearably loud. The faces seemed closer now, as if the wind had shifted, carrying them toward me. I rubbed my eyes, desperate to shake the image. When I looked again, they were gone. Nothing but uneven snowbanks, soft mounds catching the pale light. I hurried on, my footsteps quick, my hands buried deep in my pockets. But the silence followed, pressed in around me, and every few steps I caught myself glancing to the side, imagining eyes half buried, lips parting soundlessly. I turned onto my street, relieved to see the dim outline of my house. But there, at the base of the fence, I saw them again, two faces, pressed side by side, mouths stretched wide, as though they'd been calling my name before the snow drowned them. I stumbled forward, brushing them away with my boot. The powder scattered. But when it settled, the impressions were still there, softer now, fainter, but still watching. I forced myself through the gate. The hinges groaned in the quiet, and for a moment it felt like every shadow in the yard had turned its head. Inside, I locked the door, pulled the curtains, sat in silence, my breath fogging the window glass. But when I dared to look out again, through the thin gap in the curtain, I saw the snow still falling, and in the drifts beneath the street lamp, the faces were back. Clearer than before, dozens of them, all looking up toward my window. Mouths open in unbroken silence, I closed the curtain. I haven't opened it since. But sometimes, when the night is still, I swear I hear the faint crackle of snow shifting outside, like something beneath the surface is trying to breathe. The air was wet with evening. Fog clung to the trees like a slow breath. I had been walking downhill for hours, though the forest felt different, heavier somehow. The ground beneath my boots dipped and rose in ways that didn't make sense. A soft rustling followed me, but I told myself it was only leaves. Even so, the slope felt wrong, unnatural. Branches leaned toward me. At first I thought it was the wind, but the air was still. One by one, the trees tilted further, their trunks bending like they were listening or waiting. My feet dug into moss that seemed to shift under me. I stumbled sideways, caught by the pull of the earth. I hadn't moved. I hadn't intended to. But the ground tugged, insistent. The path I knew, the gentle descent I'd followed countless times. It was gone. Every step left me unsure of direction. Even the sun, low and pale, seemed skewed, spilling light in angles that hurt my eyes. A crow called above, its wings slicing through the fog. But its shadow fell the wrong way, diagonal, unnatural. I stopped. My chest tightened. The air smelled like wet pine and something older. Something rotting but alive. I shivered, pressing my palms to my thighs, grounding myself. Then the forest tilted more sharply. A tree that had been behind me now stretched out beside me, leaning almost over my shoulder. I thought it might touch me. It did not, but I felt its weight pressing in the space my body occupied. I tried to walk forward. Each step slid sideways. It was impossible. I was both moving and standing still. The fog thickened. I could see the vague shapes of trees only a few feet away. Their bark rippled as if breathing. I heard my own voice whisper, though I hadn't spoken. It was soft, but unmistakable. It repeated a name I didn't recognize, yet it sounded like it should belong to me. The slope beneath me became a wave. I fell, not down, but sideways. My hands hit soil that felt elastic, pulling me back upright, only to tilt me again. I pressed against a tree, bracing for whatever gravity it had invented. My fingers sank into the bark. It quivered beneath my touch. I could feel the pulse of the forest in a rhythm that didn't belong to any heartbeat I knew. Shadows stretched long and thin. They slid along the ground as if trying to escape the trees themselves. I realized the sky above had shifted, stars spilling sideways like spilled water. I blinked. The forest had become a corridor of impossible angles. Even my own silhouette leaned, unsteady, almost fluid. A fox darted past, but it, too, leaned against the pull of this tilting world. Its eyes reflected a sky that I could no longer call up or down. I stumbled over roots that had been perpendicular a moment ago. The fog swallowed my feet and knees in turn. Every sound was delayed, echoing and soft as breath. I tried to find the path I remembered, but nothing was consistent. The forest tilted under me, then over me, as if deciding which way it wanted to be. I called out. My voice was swallowed instantly. A branch cracked behind me. I turned. Nothing. Just a tree leaning further, its shadow stretching toward me like a question. Hours, perhaps minutes, passed. I cannot say which. Time here lost its shape. Eventually, the tilt lessened. The ground flattened, almost gentle. The fog lifted slightly, revealing a patch of familiar stars, or maybe unfamiliar ones. I stopped, panting, my hands braced against the soil. I looked up and the stars were sideways. I tilted my head to match them. I walked on carefully. The trees seemed normal now, though I knew they were not. I could still feel the subtle tug beneath my boots, a reminder that nothing had truly settled. I left the forest at last. The village lights appeared ahead, soft and steady. I exhaled, relieved, though something deep inside me stayed tilted. I glanced back sometimes, at the edge where fog meets wood. The trees lean there, impossible angles, patient and silent. I cannot tell if they are waiting or simply watching me try to remember which way is up. Even now, when I close my eyes, I feel the pull. A gentle tilt beneath my feet, a sideways whisper of wind. And I wonder if I ever truly left the forest at all. The wind had changed by the time I reached the pass, cold, carrying the scent of wet stone and pine. Fog pressed close, thick and pale, swallowing the trail behind me. I could barely see my own hands. Each step felt heavier. Every rock seemed to cling, refusing to be passed. The mountains had become shapes of shadow, quiet, watching. I told myself it was the altitude, the solitude. And yet I could feel it. Every story I'd heard, every tale that ended at a cliff or a hollow, it all led here. I had been climbing through whispers, through something that felt like memory and fear entwined. The pass was empty, yet full. Then the light appeared. Small at first, almost imagined. A flicker deep in the fog, pale as moonlight on wet stone. I stopped. The wind held its breath. It pulsed once. Then again, like a heart. I had been moving in circles, but now it seemed to guide me forward. Step by careful step, I followed it. The fog thinned just enough to reveal the shape. Not a lantern, not a cabin, a doorway. A frame of wood or stone, impossible to tell, humming softly with a light that was not fire, not electric. It vibrated in the air in my chest. I touched the cold edge. It shivered. The humming deepened, almost a voice, almost a warning. Something behind it waited. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. The light inside the doorway moved. Not a reflection, not shadow. It stretched, bending upward, stretching toward the foggy sky. And then it condensed, forming shapes that were almost familiar, almost human, almost mine. I stepped closer. The ground beneath me seemed to dissolve. Or maybe it was my own mind unraveling. I could hear the mountains sighing, soft and low, as if the rocks themselves were alive. Every heartbeat was a drum in my chest. I saw my hand in the light, but it was not my hand. Fingers too long, too pale, trembling just enough to make me hesitate. And yet it beckoned. A quiet promise. I remembered every story I had ever read about travelers, about wanderers who found what they weren't ready for. Each one ended quietly, with a pause, a breath held too long. I realized then that this was not danger I feared. It was truth. Something I had been climbing toward all along. I stepped through. The air was warm, yet the fog followed me in, curling around my ankles. The humming intensified, a language I almost understood but never quite could. Shapes drifted at the edges of my vision, waiting, patient. And then, the silence. It was not empty. It pressed in like water, soft and enveloping. I could feel it filling my chest, my lungs, my ears. The doorway behind me had vanished. Only light remained, hovering just beyond comprehension. I moved forward. Or maybe it moved me. Time no longer had weight. Mountains, fog, memory, they were all strands of the same thing. And in the center of it, the light pulsed, rhythmic, constant. I saw faces in the flicker. Not faces I knew, not faces I wanted to see, but familiar in the way a dream's shadow is familiar. They were watching, waiting, acknowledging. A gust of wind stirred, or maybe it was a sigh from something unseen. The humming changed, a chord I could feel more than hear. I did not resist. Resistance had no meaning here. I remembered the climb, every misstep, every night I had spent shivering under thin blankets, thinking of the pass. Every choice, every fear, it had been a path. The stories had not misled me. They had prepared me. The doorway appeared again, barely, at the edge of vision. A shimmer, almost imperceptible, and then gone. And in its place, stillness. Soft, endless, patient. I understood slowly. It was waiting for me to arrive. Not to save me, not to harm me, just to be noticed, to be acknowledged. I stepped into the light. It did not consume me. It held me. I could feel the pulse of it, the quiet knowledge it carried. Every story I had ever told myself, every fear, every hope, they converged here, and then I stopped. Because I realized there was nothing to chase, nothing to escape, only the quiet rhythm of presence. A gentle hum that filled the space where the world had once been. The fog drifted around me, curling like smoke, dissolving, reforming. I was alone, and yet I was not. Something was watching from the other side of what I could not see. I breathed in. The light pulsed once more, and then it did not flicker again. I remained, softly, waiting, knowing that every story, every step had brought me here, and the mountains sighed, slow, patient, silent.